everyone, today I'm going to share with you some bulb planting tips and some things to avoid. If you are new here, my name is Chantal. I garden in zone 5B, 6A. Welcome to my garden. The first tip I have for you is when to plant your spring blooming bulbs. And typically you want to plant them in the fall. If you live in a cold climate like we do, you'd want to plant them between September and all the way up to December, or basically until the ground is frozen. But you just want to make sure that when you do plant them, the temperatures are not above 60 degrees Fahrenheit, because if the temperatures start to warm up and hit the 70s and 80s, then your bulbs might get confused and begin to grow. And that is going to impact their growth the next season and impact their bloom production. Now, if you live in a warm climate, planting bulbs in the fall might not be an option for you. You may have to chill your bulbs in the fridge for up to 12 weeks. Just make sure that you do not put fruits with them, because those fruits are going to release gases that are going to cause your bulbs to rot. These are the gases that allow fruits to ripen. The same gases will cause your bulbs to rot. You can also purchase pre-chilled bulbs and plant them directly in your ground when the time is ready. Now let's talk about amending. When you are planting bulbs, most people will tell you not to amend the soil because the bulb already has the energy that it needs to bloom. But that's it. It just has the energy that it needs to bloom for the first season. And that applies especially to tulips, because tulips tend to kind of dwindle as the seasons go by. So the first season you might have a beautiful show, and then the next season you would probably have a more sporadic show. To fix that problem, we are going to amend the soil the first time with biotone right here. And you can also use bulb tone as well. This is from Espoma. I love this brand. You also want to amend the soil once in the spring, another time in early summer, and another time in late summer. That applies specifically to tulips. And that is because you want to give them as much energy as you can in order to allow them to bloom the season after, the next season. So they bloomed for you, and then you want to amend them those 3 times. At the planting time first, so that would be in the fall, and then spring, and then summer and late summer. It's sort of like planting garlic. You would do the same thing with garlic. You're going to amend it about 3 to 4 times, because it needs all that energy to grow its bulbs. Now with tulips, what happens is that the first season they are busy producing those blooms, and then in that same season, and after they're done producing their blooms, you are going to leave the leaves so that they can gather energy from the sunlight, and then they can go dormant during the late summer and the fall season. Now in the fall, what happens, just like with garlic and other similar bulbs, those tulip bulbs are going to split. They're going to make babies, and this is why most of their energy is going to go to making babies instead of producing the blooms for you the next season. So this is why feeding them is super important, feeding them those 3 times that I have talked about, so that those little baby bulbs can put on a lot of growth in just this one season and then bloom for you the next season. Now when it comes to other bulbs like daffodils and muscari and hyacinths, they're not as picky as tulips are. They seem to be more capable of reproducing a lot quicker and blooming at the same time, and they don't require as much nutrients as the tulips do. So you do not have to fertilize them as much as you would fertilize tulips. I would say a good fertilization in the spring, and then another fertilization and by the end of the season when they are done blooming, before their foliage is done, is a good practice for when it comes to caring to your bulbs. And again, you want to use something like biotone or bulb tone in order to fertilize your bulbs, because you don't want to use something that is high in nitrogen, because that's going to force the tulips and any other bulb to focus on foliar production rather than on the bulb and bloom production. Now let's talk about pests and how you can avoid them, how you can prevent them from devouring your bulbs, especially tulips. Again, you can notice that tulips are just super finicky. Animals love them because they are somewhat edible, and they are just finicky in general for when it comes to having them to come back. They need a little bit more care than other bulbs. So maybe if you do not want to deal with all of that, maybe it's best to choose some bulbs that the pests are not going to eat and will come back for you reliably. Now, this is what I'm going to use for putting inside the holes with my bulbs, and also after the bulbs bloom or come up in the spring to prevent deer from eating them, like the tulips, because they just love tulips. So I'm using Repelzol repels all. So as its name suggests, it repels all sorts of animals like squirrels, bunnies, deer, rodents of all sorts. So you put this about a tablespoon, I think it has the information on the back, in with the bulb. If you are planting a grouping of bulbs, then you would sprinkle it over the bulbs and then bury them. And also afterwards, you could also spray some deer spray. I use Bob-X for that. After the bulbs begin to bloom and their foliage is there, you want to prevent the deer from eating the foliage so that they can photosynthesize and store that energy into the bulb. And you can also use something like chicken wire to prevent squirrels and other rodents from digging into the area where you planted your bulbs and eating them. Now here's an example of what I was talking about earlier. This is a bulb, a tulip bulb right here, and you can see this little baby bulb right there that is forming. Now the next season, after it's done blooming, it's going to put its energy into making this bulb a little bit bigger because this bulb is still attached to it. I'm okay with leaving it. You can also notice I'm planting them in groupings right here. I have about 6 to 5, you can put even 7 to make it more even. And you want to make sure that your bulbs are healthy. They're not rotting, they're not drying out. If anything is drying out or rotting, you want to take those away, like this one over here. I'm not planting this one. If you notice that any of the bulbs are rotting or dried up, if they have mold on them, you want to keep those bulbs away and not plant them, because just in case if they do have a disease, you do not want that disease to stay in the soil, because that's going to affect the rest of your bulbs. And we'll talk a little more about that in a little bit. And also, if the bulbs are dried up, they may not sprout for you the next season. Don't mind the cardboard behind me. I'm using this method to keep the fall weeds down so that the next spring I wouldn't have to battle all the weeds, because this bed needs to be mulched. But let's focus on these bulbs right here. You can see that I have put them in a grouping. I have about 5 bulbs in here. You can put them even in larger groupings. That's going to create more of an impact. You can also put them in drifts. Now I'm going to use the shovel right here to create a hole for these. And just because it's going to be a little bit easier on me with the shovel, we're going to apply some biotone. Biotone is going to be very gentle on the bulbs because it is organic. It's not going to burn them. If you are using a synthetic fertilizer, you're not going to want to put it in with the bulbs like I am doing right here, but you can sprinkle it over the surface of the soil after you are done planting your bulbs. And I'm spacing them about 2 to 3 inches apart from each other. I think this is enough. It's going to create a big impact with the bulbs scattered around here in several groupings. And I'm also going to sprinkle some of this Repelsol in with the bulbs to keep the pests away so that they do not dig our bulbs. And then we just cover them. And you want to make sure to put the pointy tip up of the bulb. Also, another tip that I forgot to talk about is that you want the depth of the soil to be twice as high as the height of your bulb. So you have over here about 2-inch bulb, and you want to make your hole about 4 to 5 inches deep. And I also have this hori knife over here, and it has markings on it for the depth. Each mark is for 1 inch. I love this tool. I will put a link for it down in the description box below. I use it all the time. If you are planting individual bulbs, this is a great tool to use for that. There are also other tools that I would love to get my hands on. And these tools are just a cylinder with some teeth at the bottom of the cylinder. You poke them into the ground. They have a little handle and they create a hole. You pull the soil out, you put your bulb in, you plant it, and then you cover back with the soil that you took out. And I would love to get those. They have different sizes of them for different size bulbs. Now that I planted my bulbs here, I need some sort of a marking to let me know that my bulbs are planted here. So I'm just going to stick this stick in here to let me know next season that I have some bulbs growing in here so that I do not plant something over them. And I apologize for the unsightly cardboard in here, but for me it just cuts down on my time of weeding. This is just for this season, and then I will take it out and apply some mulch next season. Now let's talk about how you should plant your bulbs so that you can have a bigger impact in your flower beds. The best way to plant your bulbs is to plant them either in groupings. Typically you would plant them in odd numbers in bigger groups, and those are going to create a big impact, and you kind of scatter them around your flower bed in those groupings, just like you saw when I was planting the tulips. Or you plant them in large drifts, and large drifts are going to create a huge impact if this is what you want. Personally, I would do large drifts with things that I know for sure are going to come back reliably for me, because if I did a large drift with something that I know may not come back reliably for me the next season, then I would have possibly spent a lot of money on that bulb, planted it that season, and then the next season I would be very disappointed. Although you might still have a good show come back the next season afterwards. But these are some of the ways that you want to plant your tulip bulbs. You don't want to plant them one here, one there, because that's not going to create as much of an impact for you. Just make sure to put them in clusters or drifts to create that impact that you are looking for. Now this right here is an area that I've been working on. This is the area where I planted my evergreens right here, these Spartan junipers. And all these jugs are actually perennials that I just planted recently. And next season we will check on them and see how they are doing for us. And I think so far they've been doing great. You can see right there I have a delphinium. Anyways, let's get back over here. So I have these muscari right here, and I wish I got more of these because I want to create a big drift in this area over here. This is an area, again, I'm working on. There's a lot of cleaning that has to be done in the woods over here. It's been a work in progress, and there's a tree that's going to be planted right around this area possibly next season. So I'm going to keep that in mind while I'm planting. I'm going to kind of designate this space right here for that tree, and then I'm going to plant around it because I want to have the appearance of sort of a woodland garden in here. This is why I was saying I wish I had more of these, because I want kind of a carpet of muscari and then daffodils popping in between them. I think that would look really beautiful in this area right here. And this tree is going to be a snowball viburnum in this area right here, and I think it's going to look very beautiful. And hopefully next season I can clean all of this mess right here. And the last tip we are going to talk about is dividing your bulbs. Now you might not think that you do need to divide your bulbs, but as I have showed you that your bulbs do multiply, especially daffodils. They have a rapid rate at multiplying, so every now and then it's good to dig them up, divide them, and then replant them. And you want to do that after the foliage has died back completely, because you want to make sure that these bulbs can gather the energy from the sun before you dig them up. And then once they are done gathering that energy, once their foliage have died back completely, then you can dig them up and divide them and plant them wherever you want them. And this is a great way to actually save on money. You would be multiplying your bulbs and you would be giving them some space so that they can produce more bulbs and so that they can put on more foliage and they would not be suffocating. And by doing that, you will also be preventing them from developing diseases, because if they are overcrowded, there's a possibility that they might develop diseases because of the extreme humidity and moisture basically that they would be exposed to if they're all up against each other and they're not allowed to aerate. Their foliage is not allowed to also be exposed to more air circulation. So that will help you prevent some of the diseases, which we are going to talk about right now. In this bed that you see behind me, I have tulips and daffodils planted. I planted them several seasons ago, but in the past 2 seasons I had some annuals planted in here, and I ended up giving them a little bit too much water, and that caused most of my tulip bulbs that were in here a disease that is known by tulip fire. And you will see that disease in the bloom. It's going to appear as spotted blooms, and they're kind of tattered. And also on the foliage, the leaves are going to look spotted, and then they will burn up very quickly. This is why it's called tulip fire. So they will crisp up basically very quickly. And also when you pull up your bulbs, you're also going to see those same that same appearance on your bulbs. So this is a disease that is very contagious, and you don't want to plant again in that same area if you do have that disease in your garden, because that is a disease that is spread by the soil, and it stays present in the soil for up to 5 years. So if you do have that disease, you want to make sure to not plant tulips again in that area for up to 5 years. You can choose any other location, but just not that location, because you will end up destroying your tulip bulbs basically. Now I do have daffodils in here as well, but daffodils are not affected by that disease, so I don't have to do anything about them, with exception to maybe the tip that I talked about a little bit earlier, which is dividing your bulbs, because the daffodils tend to multiply very quickly. So in this area over here, I won't be able to plant any tulips until about 5 years from now. I do have those tulip bulbs still in here, so I have to pull them up the next season when they come up, so that I can sanitize this area basically and have it ready for planting again in about 5 years. So I still have some space on the top of the hill up there, so I can plant in that area as long as it's a little bit far away from the soil over here where the tulips were originally planted. So that's something that you want to keep in mind when you are planting tulip bulbs. Also, if you do purchase your bulbs and you notice those kind of moldy spores on them, you may want to avoid planting them, because they may have some tulip fire in there, and you would be basically risking losing that space for the tulip fire for about 5 years. And that's a lot to sacrifice. Now, I don't know a lot about other diseases, but this is a disease that I have experienced myself with my tulips, and this is why I'm talking about it. But if you know of any other diseases, please leave them in the comment section down below, and maybe I'll do some more research on them, and maybe that will be another video that we can talk about bulb diseases and what to do to avoid them and how to combat them. So these are the tips that I have for you when it comes to planting bulbs. Now I'm going to share with you what bulbs I'm planting in my garden. This is the bulbs that I shared with you a little bit earlier. These are the muscari and daffodils. I'm not exactly sure what kind of a daffodil that is. Looks like a daffodil that has multi-blooms on one stem. You can see right there. It looks very beautiful, and I'm super excited about these. I'm also going to be planting some purple sensation allium. Hyacinths. I have 2 different mixes of the hyacinth. I have the William and Kate mix and just a regular hyacinth mix, and this one has some lighter pinks, darker pinks like a fuchsia, the purples and the whites. The other ones just had some dark pinks and the purples, and also the purple flag tulip. And these are the tulips that you saw me planting earlier. I have 3 bags of the tulips, 2 bags of the hyacinths, I think 1 of the alliums. I wish I was able to get more. Personally, I would have loved to get a whole lot of each of them, because I have one bonus tip for you, and that is when you are planting in a specific area, make sure to plant a whole lot of that specific bulb and not just one of each variety, because when you do have the same color, same appearance, or maybe just a mix like with the hyacinths that kind of go together in a larger grouping or in a drift, that's going to create a much bigger impact than having all sorts of different colors that maybe do not go together. Now, if that's something that you like, hey, I'm not going to stop you. You can do whatever you want. But personally, I think that maybe having one kind or maybe 3 different kinds that kind of go together, that's going to look very nice. Also, you can stagger your blooms with things that bloom a little bit earlier, things that bloom a little bit later. Like maybe you can have some daffodils first that bloom a little bit earlier, and then have some tulips, and then have some of the alliums, because the alliums are the ones that one of the bulbs that bloom last, and you will kind of extend your blooming season all the way almost until all your perennials are ready to start blooming. And some of them, with like the alliums for example, are going to be blooming when a lot of your perennials are already up, and maybe some of them have started blooming, maybe some of your trees have started blooming. and they will work really nicely together. Now I wanted to get the Globemaster Allium, but the area that I want to plant it in is not ready yet. And I wish I got the Globemaster Allium because I think that would look really nice with these over here, with the Muscari and the daffodils. Now it's not going to bloom at the same time, but if they by chance happen to bloom almost at the same time, where maybe these are kind of petering out and the alliums are blooming, that would look really nice. Also, the alliums are a lot taller, so they will look like they are kind of towering over them because they have really tall stalks, especially with the ambassador allium, and they have a large bloom, a large ball kind of a bloom. Like these are the Sensation Allium. They're a lot smaller. They still have a beautiful bloom. Whoops. But they're just for different applications. And they all fell down. And also with the ambassador alliums, you can plant them a little bit deeper into your flower border or in your flower beds, where they can hide, where you can hide their foliage behind other plants. And make sure also, that's something also you might want to think. I'm full of tips right now. That's something also you want to think about when you are planting your bulbs, that you want to plant them maybe in between your perennials, so that when the perennials do grow, they will hide the unsightly foliage, because the foliage of tulip bulbs and daffodils and such is not exactly something that you want to look at. Now, if that's something that you like, that's okay, but personally, I think that they would look nicer if they are planted in between your perennials, so that when the perennials do grow, they will hide the foliage, and then you don't have to even worry about it. You don't even have to worry about cutting it back, because it will just disintegrate and go down into the soil. Or maybe you can cut it back and just kind of leave it over the surface of the soil to break down and feed the soil. That is if you don't have any disease in your bulbs. I'm running out of time over here. I do have to do some bulb planting. I'm going to try my best to do a little bit before it gets dark, and I hope you enjoyed these tips. I hope you found them helpful. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you again in the next video. Bye. All this area has been planted with the flag tulips and the purple sensation alliums. Wherever you see those little sticks sticking out of the ground, this is where the tulips and the purple sensation alliums have been planted. Now in the spring, I will be taking out the cardboard. I'm basically moving the cardboard from one place to another just to kill the plants that are under it, because there are a lot of weeds and I have no time to come here and weed it. And these are, some of them are perennial weeds, and I don't want them to just continue to multiply in here.